Well, welcome back to my channel where we talk everything finance and economics with an Austrian flavor. You can see I'm proudly wearing my In the Fed hat today. And on today's episode, we're going to look at, is the Aussie housing market about to crash? And before we have a look at what's happening to house prices, once again, we do not give financial advice on this channel. We are just all about education and entertainment. You should not listen to a word I say. Go see your own financial planner for your own situation. All right, so are house prices going to collapse, or are they going to rise? As we go through this video, we'll look at the data and you can make up your own mind as to where house prices are going. So as you can see here, this is the ABS. I emphasize the BS in ABS. Unemployment numbers, which fell to 6.8%. No one outside of the ABS thought that unemployment was going to fall. In fact, everybody, including the RBA, thought unemployment was going to rise. But we'll have a look at what's behind those numbers in a second. What I prefer to look at is the Roy Morgan data. So the Roy Morgan unemployment actually rose to 13.8%. And I think this is a lot more accurate of the true reflection of our unemployment. And ABS always underdo theirs. And if you say that the unemployment from the ABS is 6.8%, you can see that Roy Morgan's basically double that. And you know what's interesting, the ABS, their numbers are so fanciful. Basically, if you set up an ABN and you drove 1 hour of Uber, you're fully employed according to the ABS. So this is owner manager without employees. So sole traders, ABN holders, delivering menu log, food and Uber and all that. Yeah, that's great. That's booming. So we'll have a great boom in the menu log and all those things, Uber. But really, and this is why I say the ABS, and I emphasize the BS. I know what the BS stands for in the ABS, but yeah, it's ridiculous, because really, if the ABS just picked up the phone and called Centrelink and said, hey, how many of you guys got there on JobSeeker? Oh, 1.6 million. Okay. Yep, all right. Well, that works out to be about 12-13% unemployment, as you can see here in this graph. So once again, even if you look at, the numbers from Centrelink, those that are on JobSeeker, the unemployment rate is much closer to Roy Morgan's and nowhere near the ABS numbers. So when you go and apply for the dole or JobSeeker, it's called now, you're unemployed. You're unemployed. But the ABS go, well, no, you're not. No, you're not. So look, our unemployment numbers from the ABS are so dodgy, it's not funny. I recommend that you follow Roy Morgan if you really want to keep up to date on the true numbers for our unemployment rate. Here you can see GDP last quarter fell 7%. So it was the biggest fall that we've had, and you can see our previous two recessions, the early 80s in green and the early 90s in orange. And what's interesting when you have a look at this, so and relate it back to unemployment. So this is our early 90s recession. Oh, this is us here, okay? Now, in the early 90s recession, when unemployment hit double digits, so hit above 10%, it took over 4 years for unemployment to get back down to single digits, to get back under 10%. And it actually took 10 years, a whole decade, for unemployment to get back to its pre-early 90s recession unemployment rate. Okay, so just think of that. So have a look at the GDP fall, have a look at the GDP fall, think of the unemployment numbers and how long it took for unemployment to come back to its pre-recession levels. and people talking about, next year we'll go back to pre-Cerveza sickness unemployment levels. I mean, all you have to do is study history, go back, look at the data, see what's happened, so that you can extrapolate it and look at what's going to happen in the future. People are dreaming if they think unemployment's going back to our pre-Cerveza sickness numbers of 5.2% next year. It's an absolute joke. Business confidence, that continues to slide, so you can see the trend there, and that's been sliding for some time. But the other thing, so since the last handful of years of the Howard government, we've really increased our immigration to Australia, and how many prime ministers we had since then? About 100. We've just had a massive immigration program, but because of the Cerveza sickness and the border closures, you can see that immigration is to fall off a cliff. And we know that immigration has had a big impact on housing prices. So if we don't know when the international borders will open up, we don't know when the immigration will start flowing back in, or at what numbers. But I'll tell you this: if we've got high unemployment in Australia, good luck to any government that decides to open the borders and bring back the same level of immigrants as pre-Cerveza sickness. You want social unrest. You watch Australians who are unemployed get really, really upset if the government of the day starts bringing in a lot of people from overseas while we've got high unemployment here at home. So that's political suicide. You can see here the direct fiscal response. So Australia here, it's actually a bit more than that. It's close to 11% of 2019 GDP. But in terms of where we've focused our direct fiscal response is really wage subsidies. So yeah, we win the gold medal there in terms of wage subsidies, and that's what the Australian government have mainly focused on, which has really, I guess, negated the pain of this recession. So people really haven't felt the pain of this recession yet. Some people have, but a lot of people haven't yet. And this just shows why or how. So according to the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, as we've seen wages and salaries fall due to unemployment rising, with the government stepping in and all the other rent deferrals and mortgage deferrals, from a cash flow point of view, people have actually increased their funds going into their bank account. So you can see here that there's actually been a net cash flow impact for households. So there's been $17 billion lost in wages and unincorporated business income. But then we've had $41 billion in government support from the economic support payments, JobSeeker, JobKeeper, Early Super. That's actually $33 billion, so that's even more. The mortgage deferrals and even rent deferrals in there as well. So the net cash flow impact is actually higher than that. So as I said, we really haven't felt the pain of this recession yet. What's interesting is because of JobKeeper, this is almost entirely driven by JobKeeper, is we've seen corporate profits rise 15% in the second quarter. Okay, so governments have been subsidising wages, so companies haven't had to fork out all those expenses, so their profits have risen. At the same time, wages have been down 3.3%. And this is the fiscal cliff that we are seeing because we have now entered the fourth quarter, and early super withdrawal is basically almost gone. Everyone's kind of taken that out. JobSeeker, JobKeeper is winding down, and also the mortgage deferrals. We've had clients now that have received letters from banks saying basically final demand. You've got 7 days to pay, or we're calling in the solicitors. So things are about to get nasty, and people don't realize. People have buried their heads in the sand. When people get into financial difficulties, they freeze. They freeze. They can't make a decision. They just bury their head in the sand and hope the problem will go away, or hope something will happen, that someone will save them, the government, whatever. And they can't make a decision. They freeze, and it ends up biting them in the backside. We actually have advised some clients in the past, when they've got into financial difficulty, to sell their property. They've had a lot of equity in their home, and we've advised them they've got to the point where if they don't make the decision to sell right now, they're going to lose that home. The bank's going to come in and take it, and they're going to lose all that equity. They walk away with nothing. And so, we've got some economic pain to come. We haven't felt the recession yet. Here is a chart of mortgage delinquencies in the US. So there are 8.22% of all loans that are delinquent, that are in arrears. What's interesting is you can see here at the peak of the GFC, it was 10.12%. And according to APRA, our number of mortgage delinquencies in Australia is very low, as you can see. However, we really haven't followed the US. So APRA have allowed our Australian banks not to report all those that are in mortgage deferral to be delinquent, where in the US they do. And what's interesting is that here in Australia, we now have 8.5% of all loans that are still deferred. It was, and in terms of mortgages, it's 9%. So 9% of all mortgages in Australia. So it's almost at the peak of the GFC. Okay. In July, there was $167 billion of housing loans that were being deferred. So as the banks have ended this deferral program and got people paying again, they've only been able to get $7 billion worth of loans paying something. Okay, so there's still $160 billion. So think of this, back in July, there's $167 billion worth of loans being deferred. Currently there's $160 billion worth of loans still being deferred. So only $7 billion worth of loans have people been able to start making some repayments and start getting back on track. So, but APRA don't have to, the banks don't have to report this, which just, once again, ABS, APRA, the RBA, you name it, they all want to make things look much better than what's really going on. Regions that are hit, pandemic hit with mortgages, I've been saying for a while that I expect Gold Coast, being a Queenslander, that obviously I take a more closer look at Queensland, but Gold Coast was one that I have been saying all year is going to get hit hard, and the stats show that. In fact, if you have a look at the proportion of mortgages being deferred, 9 out of 10 biggest areas that are being deferred are in Queensland. Yet we're hearing that people in Sydney and Victoria want to move to Queensland, yet our economy is so shot, we are so struggling that we are taking the gold medal with mortgage deferrals. And you can see it's really that tourism sector. So you can see Cairns down the bottom, Whitsundays up the top, and you got Noosa there up the Sunshine Coast, and then all the other areas are on the Gold Coast in Queensland there. So they're on the Gold Coast. So it's that tourism sector that's getting hit hard. And according to Digital Finance Analytics, we've got mortgage stress at a record high of 40.2, and it's estimated to rise to 40.8. And look, you can see the trend there on mortgage stress, even going back to the year 2000. We can see the trend, and we can see the trend really picking up fast. And this is while interest rates have been going down to record lows. So with people out there, the property bulls out there, the perma bulls, say that, housing affordability has never been this good because interest rates are so low. Really? Well, the mortgage stress. And what is mortgage stress? Mortgage stress is a cash flow, so it's net income coming in versus expenses going out. And obviously, if you are in mortgage stress, that means you've got more expenses going out than you do income coming in, and we know that don't end well. So this is the US National Home Price Index. So it took about 5 years from peak to trough for the US housing market to collapse. What's interesting is if you have a look at Sydney, Sydney housing peaked on the 5th of May, and Melbourne housing peaked on the 6th of April. And so basically in the first 5 months of the Great Recession, housing in the US fell 3.46%. Okay, so here's the thing. There's a lot of things in the media going, oh, house prices haven't collapsed. Yeah, house prices in fact, a study has been done that says house prices take 6 years to collapse. Or every housing crash takes 6 years from peak to trough. What have we been in? 6 months. 6 months. Okay, what you need to do is compare the time period. So for the first 5 months, the US recession, housing crashed 3.46%. So how does that equate to our two biggest cities, Sydney and Melbourne? Well, here you go. So you can see in the blue is the US property market. Melbourne, currently down 4.82%, Sydney 2.62%. So they're right on track. In fact, Melbourne's beating the US at the current rate. But you won't hear this in mainstream media. You won't hear this anywhere. But you will hear the truth on this channel. Also, what's interesting, we hear this narrative in the media that there's this demand for Queensland property. There's pent-up demand. It's so strong. Yet, when we look at it, so this is Sydney and Brisbane combined home sales. Brisbane property sales are actually down 69% compared to its peak, nearly 17 years ago. What's that? Actually longer than 17 years ago. So in terms of sales, demand is actually at a record low. And as I said, all these stimulus payments and mortgage deferrals, rent deferral, all this sort of stuff ends, I think we're going to see a pent-up, not demand, but this pent-up supply. People are going to be forced to sell before the banks come in and take it, or the banks will just come in and take it. People will just bury their head in the sand, as I said, and freeze. But housing turnover stock has been trending down for some time now. And what's interesting, I wanted to share this slide because once again, you hear things in the media, from so-called experts, and you're like, oh, yep, cool. Well, if XYZ said that, then so be it. John Maynard Keynes. Now, our economic system is based on his theory. Okay, he is not a trained economist. He has no education or qualifications in economics, yet our whole economic system is based on his theory. In 1927, he said, we will not have any more crashes in our time. 2 years later, in 1929, the great Austrian economist Ludwig von Mises said that a great crash is coming. And what happened? We know what happened. So looking at some of our permeables in Australia, you can see this article from Terry Ryder in September last year. Perth recovery back on track. Perth is the place to buy. And Stephen Koukalis, who I believe was an economic advisor to Julia Gillard, I could be wrong, but that's what I've been told. Here you can see the date down the bottom there, 26th of October 2016. So we'll have a look at that in a sec. House prices are surging because of low supply. It's economics 101, he says. You can argue all you like about tax rules on capital gains and negative gearing, but basic rules still apply in the housing market. Look at Perth. Okay, let's look at Perth. So 2016, we're here. So he says we should buy. That Perth is going good. Ooh, where's Perth going? Ooh, down and down and down. And Perth has continued to go down. Ooh, that's not looking good. But I thought listening to these property experts that Perth was great to buy. That don't look too good. In fact, Perth is down over 20% at the moment. You can see Darwin has fallen quite significantly. And actually, if you have a look here, back in 2018, 19, houses actually fell significantly. And we'll have a look at that in a sec. You can see our two major cities also fell dramatically there. But we'll have a look at that in a second. What about this? So, a lot of people say, look, Steve, you can't compare the US market to the Australian market because in America they have jingle mail. They have jingle mail, so non-recourse lending, you can just hand back your keys and she's all sweet. All right. One, I'm going to bust a myth on that in a second. In fact, no, let me get to it right now. So people say you can't, compare Australia and the US housing market because of that. We've got recourse lending, which means if a bank comes and takes your property and there's still debt owing, you're still up for that debt. So people won't let go of their properties, where in the US you can just hand back your keys and voila. Well, as someone who is a property investor and owns property in the US in different states, I can tell you that's rubbish, and a study by two Federal Reserve economists have actually put that to bed, because there's, out of all the states in America, only 11 states have non-recourse lending, i.e. jingle mail. All the rest have recourse lending. So in Florida and Nevada, they had recourse lending, where California and Oregon, for example, have non-recourse lending. So it's just not true. It's just not true. But anyway, let's just say, okay, well, we won't compare Australia and the US. All right. How about we measure or compare Australia and Ireland? Because in Ireland, they do have recourse lending. Not only do they have recourse lending, but their rules are even stricter than Australia, because they have rules that if there's non-payment, that could result in imprisonment. Okay, so imagine that if you take out a loan here in Australia and you default on it, you don't pay it back, you could potentially face imprisonment. Well, that's what they had in Ireland. So Ireland was even stricter than that. Yet we know what happened to Ireland, right? Here, I'll put a link to this article down below. But here you've got the central bank in the US predicting a soft landing for housing, and we know what happened there. So I did share this in a previous video where, and I'll leave this in the link below as well, and you can read it for yourself. But this is where Graydon Costigan from the Reserve Bank basically said that there's going to be a huge crash, and that the fall will be like the Celtic Tiger all over again, meaning the Irish property market, which is interesting. So I'll put a link to that below. So let's just have a look at this little video. And once again, you'll see things in the media, things that you hear, just like we showed with the two property bulls about Perth. Let's have a look at what they said about Ireland. So there you have it. Once again, you can see leading up, everyone says, oh, all these property experts, property won't fall, or now's the time to buy, or property will only fall 5 or 10%, it'll be a soft landing, blah blah blah, all this sort of rubbish. And then the Irish property market ended up falling 54.4% from peak to trough. And it doesn't fall in 6 months. As you can see, it falls over a long period of time. And I'm not saying that the Irish property market fall is going to happen in Australia. I don't know. It could happen. I don't know. But I'll come shortly to where I think things might be going for the Australian property market. But you really don't know where you are at any one time. So we really don't know how far property prices will fall. We can only guesstimate, really. But what's interesting is the proportion of first home buyers as a percentage of total buyers. So like Australia, first home buyers always kind of just under that 20% mark. But then when properties started to fall in Ireland, then first home buyers started to get back in. And by the bottom of the fall in Ireland, first home buyers made up over 60% of all buyers buying. So once again, first home buyers, this was great for them. Instead of buying at the peak, they waited, they bought cheaper properties, less debt, less mortgage. So by having a smaller mortgage, they had more disposable income left to spend into the economy. And Ireland's actually had one of the better economic growth stories post the GFC than most other jurisdictions around the world. So where is Australia at in terms of our first home buyers? So obviously the government have come out with a lot of first home buyer incentives, such as the first home loan deposit scheme, where you can have up to 5% deposit and pay no lender's mortgage insurance, because the government will cover that. We've had Home Builder, which once again expires at the end of the year, but there's talk that the government will be coming out with something, if not extending it. So with that, with state government grants, so here in Queensland, you can get basically if you go to a regional area, $45,000 in government grants to build a new home and pay no LMI. So we've actually seen, even in our business, we're getting 2 to 3 inquiries a day from first home buyers, and you can see that there's been a big spike in that. In fact, it's the highest number of first home buyer commitments in 11 years. So what I worry about is first home buyers are being basically lambs to the slaughterhouse. So they are getting in at the peak of the of housing prices, rather than looking at what those island first home buyers did. And in fact, we've just advised people just to be cautious, just to be patient. Properties aren't going to run away anytime soon, so just be patient. You can have a look at any slide you like, and housing has always followed wages for the last 150 years. You can go back and have a look at that. There was a divergence in the late 80s. House prices shot up, but then through the 90s, house prices slowly came down as wages came up, and they almost met again. But then in the late 90s, house prices took up, and then early 2000s and beyond, house prices have fully gotten away from wages, and now we've got zero bound interest rates, and really people's serviceability is at kind of record highs. So how much upside does real estate have? It's had all the tailwinds possible: mass immigration, lowest interest rates, easy credit, up to 9 times the banks would have lent you. Now they've tightened that. Some have brought it back to 7, some have brought it back to 6. So, credit is getting stricter. Interest rates, basically are the lowest they're going to be. And house prices never really been higher. So where do I think house prices are going? Well, once again, you can measure house prices on many different levels. Household debt to GDP, you can see Australia here in blue. Once again, we take the gold medal. You can see Ireland there really came back. So Australia, very high indebtedness. Whether you want to work it out as household debt to income, once again, we take the gold medal at around 200% there, which is it's really crazy, really crazy. And once again, debt servicing ratio. So, Australia takes the gold medal there. And this is even back in 2017. So, once again, let's go back to 2018-19, where we've had what was unemployment around 5.2%. There was no lockdowns. There was no cerveza sickness. There was none of these issues, right? Low interest rates, all that. Yet in 12 months, Sydney fell nearly 11%. Melbourne fell 10%. Okay, so think of that. So yes, I know it was leading up to an election, and Labor were proposing some changes to tax laws and tax incentives for property, but we still had low unemployment. We had high levels of immigration. We had easy credit. We had low interest rates. We had everything going for property, yet it could fall that much. Think of the unemployment numbers. Think of the cerveza sickness, the lockdowns, the immigration levels. Banks, now aren't lending as much as they used to based on your income. There are so many headwinds now for the property market. Yet you hear experts saying, "Oh no, properties will only fall 5 or 10%, maybe 7% at most." Do they not realise what properties did in 2018-19 for that 1 year? That 1 year when we didn't have all these headwinds? Okay, once again, just put things into a little bit of perspective. This is an interesting chart from Nucleus Wealth. So you got the boom period here, the bust that we're talking in 2018, pre-COVID, post-COVID. Credit availability. I would say credit availability is exactly the same as 2018. I'm in this game, so I see what banks do and lending. Banks, as I said, banks have restricted the amount you can borrow based on your income. Also, banks, anything above 80% LVR, they have tightened. Construction lending, they've pulled back to 90% tops, 85 and even 80% for some lenders. I think Adelaide and Bendigo Bank will only do 80% on construction lending. First home buyers, all that sort of stuff, that high LVR stuff above 80%, the banks have got very strict. So I wouldn't have green there. Price of credit, sure, it has got slightly cheaper because of the cerveza sickness, and the RBA have cut rates, but it's not much cheaper than it was a couple of years ago. But the big ones, look at that. Employment, that's a big problem. Population growth, foreign buyers, this is a major headwind. But I'd add credit availability moving forward as a potential headwind as well. And then also, what doesn't get spoken about in the mainstream media is the oversupply. According to the last census, we have 1.2 million vacant properties in Australia today. 1.2 million vacant properties in Australia. So we do not have an undersupply of properties. Okay. Here you can see the latest credit data. So housing in August rose slightly by 0.2%, with owner occupied being at 0.5%. 4%. Investor went nowhere. And don't forget, these also take into account mortgage deferrals increasing. So total outstanding credit. So as people, having their interest added on top of their loans, this is also impacting that. Okay, so there's not this huge demand that people think out there, and you can see business lending has contracted for a little while now. So there's no big boom for credit out there. So once again, this is from Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, and if you do not follow him on YouTube, do yourself a favor and do that, because he's really one of the sharpest guys. He's a really data-driven guy, and data don't lie. Data is data, and this is his probability of different scenarios for property for the next 24 to 36 months. So the next 2 to 3 years, because as we've seen, property doesn't fall like a stock market does in 1 month. Property takes, even 5 to 6 years to fall from peak to trough. Okay, so here we've got a few different scenarios, which you can see, which includes unemployment rate, RBA cash rate, mortgage stress. So we're pretty much there. Look, he's got almost a 50% probability that house prices will fall 15 to 30%. If you take his best case, which is 20%, and his second wave disruption of 25%, here you've got pretty much well over 90% anyway, that house prices are going to fall somewhere between 5 and 45%. Which I think all of us can say, yep, that's pretty likely to happen. Personally, my opinion is I think we'll probably be somewhere in here, this 15 to 30% price fall. I'm still sticking to that. Nothing's changed my mind when I see the data to that. Yes, it could fall more. It could be a Harry Dent scenario, or a US or Ireland type scenario. Or there's one other scenario which is started to be talked about, which is this the property crash where prices skyrocket. And I'll put a link to this article from Luke McInnes below. It's a wonderful article, and it's something that I've thought about. It's something that economist John Adams has also wrote about and spoke about for a couple of years now. I won't steal too much of the thunder, but basically properties rise in nominal terms, but due to the collapse of the Australian dollar, because of what the government and RBA will have to do to save the property market, amongst other things, such as the demand for Australian dollars outside of Australia, the demand for US dollars, our household debt position, our structural deficit issues and whatnot. There could be that could be one scenario. So I'll let you read that article in your own time, and definitely tell me what you guys think of it. Do you think house prices are going to fall? Do you think they're going to fall as much as I think they are, less, more? Or do you subscribe to the John Adams, Luke McInnes theory that in nominal terms house prices may rise, but will ultimately be crashing due to the Aussie dollar collapsing? It's an interesting thing. There's no certainties in this game. It's all probabilities, looking at data, looking at history and trying to extrapolate that. History doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme, and so that's an important little thing to remember. So yeah, definitely. One of the reasons I've put this channel together, pastor at my church asked me to do some presentations to help church members during this period, and so I did that. I said, as long as I can be honest, give my honest opinion, and then that's kind of developed into this, and it's about me just giving my thoughts, hopefully giving a bit of education as well, get you guys to think about things. But also, I'd love to start seeing your comments and your thoughts down below. Picking holes in my theories. That's I'm part of some other investment groups where that's what we do. We put our theories forward, and people pick holes in them, because sometimes we don't see potential holes in our theories, and we go ahead and make an investment decision, and we make a mistake because we didn't see our shortcomings. So definitely love to see that interaction in the comment section, so that together we can all grow and learn together. So yeah, that's the whole reason for the channel. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you're enjoying the channel, and I look forward to engaging with you more into the future. So until then, thanks once again for joining me, and I'll see you again on another episode of Finance Uncut.